Hello and welcome to Catherine Paper Art. Here's a technique that's a lot of fun using water reactive inks, a gel plate, and a brayer. And I'll show you how that's done coming up next. I think it's helpful to take a look at each of the cards before we begin the tutorial so that you can see the finished product, and then the process will make more sense. This was the first card I made, and I basically just used some die-cut flowers, a simple sentiment on a showcase panel. The next card I used, same concept, flowers with an additional element and a lot more dimension, and using the same colors pulled out from the panel to create the sentiment. The third card, I stamped an image onto the panel and then inked it in with the stencil that came with it. That's a popular concept right now, stamps with matching stencils to make the inking much faster. And then popped it up with some foam tape onto a mat, which is directly glued onto the card panel. And the next one I did was a silhouette on basically the most colorful background, which reminded me of an aurora borealis, and put that on a direct glued down black matting, no sentiment. And the last one I did was also a stamp onto the panel and inked in with stencils, and then I cut a frame and raised the panels and the frame for dimension and added some bling. I heat embossed a sentiment and added a second layer to that, and those are the cards. So we'll go ahead and start the video, and each of the backgrounds, as I said, are water reactive inks using a brayer and a gel press, and it's a lot of fun, so I hope you'll give it a try. To make these inked backgrounds, these are the tools that we'll need. So you need some water reactive inks, any kind, as long as they are water reactive. We'll need a gel press. I have this giant one, but you can use any size, and brayers. You just need one brayer, and it can be any size. It should just be a hard brayer versus a soft brayer. A spritzing bottle, and cardstock. You want to use a heavyweight cardstock. Doesn't have to be a watercolor cardstock. It can just be, I'm just using the Nina 110-pound weight, the classic crest in Solar White. And if you don't know what a gel printing plate is, it's just a rubbery, not even really rubbery, but just a gel kind of plate. And I bought this from Amazon. You can get them from any scrapbooking store or any art store. And like I said, they come in any size. So we'll go ahead and get started. To make the backgrounds, I started by tapping or lightly rubbing my ink pads onto the gel plate. I first used Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated ink in Sunbeam, then Sprout, which is green, and then I used a little bit of PinkFresh Studio in Blue Jay. I spritzed a little water onto the ink and used my brayer to roll over the ink in several directions, blending the ink colors. One thing that's important to note is that whatever direction you use the brayer, the ink will pick up onto the cardstock in that same direction. I purposely put down my inks very lightly. That's just the direction I wanted to go in, but you could go very bold by laying them down much heavier. You'll see that I was able to keep picking up the ink even though it looks as though there's really nothing on the gel plate. And I changed colors and made more backgrounds. These are really fun and really virtually effortless to make. You'll notice that I inked up the backside of one piece that I thought got too dark for what I was trying to achieve. And once the ink dries, you can keep adding layers of color. So then I added a little bit of Simon Says Stamp Positively Saturated Ink in Carnation, along with Cantaloupe and Sunbeam. And after adding these colors onto the cardstock a couple times, it was at this point that the cantaloupe took over. So I decided to flip the cardstock to the back side and try again, this time going a bit more conservative with the cantaloupe. And one thing I will say, it's very easy to get too much color down. You also need to be careful about which colors you mix, otherwise you can end up with a muddy mess. Because I put the ink on very lightly, it dried very quickly, so adding new layers took no time at all. I didn't have to wait for it to dry. You can see I made many backgrounds, more than what I used in this video, and I will make cards with those in future projects. Whenever I get into a creative slump, I make backgrounds such as these to help me visualize new ideas, new projects. It's a great exercise. I've cut some flowers from the Spellbinders Petite Floral Potpourri cutting dies. They're a nice little collection of flower dies. And I've cut down one of my backgrounds and mounted it onto a pink sand cardstock panel. And this is a nice tool to have, this bone folder wedge. If you glue your panel on and you don't get it right, you pull it off and you press it down again and you still don't get it right, you put it down a third time, then this wedge helps the glue stick instead of placing some heavy block on it or something. This is a nice tool to have. This is from bonefolder.com. Indispensable. So I'll go ahead and assemble some of these flowers and be right back. So I've cut down this panel and I am ready to mount it to a panel beneath it. A matting panel. I use the Waffle Flower nesting rectangular frames and the additional frames to cut these, and it's perfectly sized. They're a nice set of dies, so you can get the perfect size for A2 cards or for getting the margins that you want. So I'm ready to mount this to the card, and I've cut out my die cuts and my sentiment, and I'll glue those on and be right back. That is the second card finished. That's the first. That's the second. And we'll go on to the third. So on this third card, I stamped out the PinkFresh Studio's Blooming Branch, and that comes with stencils and, well, you can get a die also. I didn't use the die because I put it on this inked up panel, and I will just mount this onto the card. And I used the same colors basically that I used when I made the card. These are the colors I used: Simon Says stamp, Sprout and Sunbeam, and then the PinkFresh Studio's Blue Jay. But with the flowers, because they're layered, I used Slumber, Blue Jay, and Sapphire to give a little more dimension. I didn't want to go heavy-handed because I like the fact that the background comes through the flowers and the leaves. So I will get a card base and be right back. So I've mounted a piece of Spellbinders Cosmic Sky as a mat to the card base, and I've put some foam tape on the panel, and I'm going to stick that down and add a little bling, and I'll be right back. Okay, that's finished. I put this calls for confetti, clear dewdrops on here. And that is the third card completed. For the next card, I decided I was going to do a silhouette. And I have this die from Sizzix. It's a Tim Holtz. It's called Flower Field. It's an older die. And black cardstock, I don't know why, but it always seems to leave little hairs on the die cuts. And because this one's so fragile, before I take tape to it, another good method for removing those little hairs is using a stiff brush to brush them off. And it does remove, I don't know if you can see that, but it does remove a great deal of the fine little hairs that remain. Because you don't, if you use tape on something as delicate as this, you risk tearing it, obviously. So a good stiff brush can help a lot on that. Even though I used a good stiff brush and I got rid of a lot of it, there's still so many hairs left. And there's some that I just can't reach in there, but that's good enough for now. So I used some spray adhesive to mount this, and it's a particularly windy day outside, so I had to spray it inside. And what I like to do is use a piece of release paper from some other adhesive and use that to press it down with. But I use a glue eraser to remove any overspray from the front. Oops. And clean it up that way. And then I'll trim this down and be right back. So I've mounted this to a black mat and onto a card base, and this card is done. I decided to do a double layer of the silhouette because it just didn't really have much pop to it. And if I'd have been thinking right, I would have done an inlay and then done a triple layer of the silhouette, the inlay and then 2 layers on top, because that makes a really nice presentation. I've done cards like that before that are very nice. But anyway, so this is a double layer, and I used Stick It, and it was a pretty bold move on my part to do that because I really have a hard time seeing, and you can see I didn't really get this lined up too well, but I haven't really pressed it down yet, so I can fuss with it a little bit longer. But anyway, that's the silhouette. And now I'll get on to the next card. I forgot to say too that this Hello Bumblebee card, for the flowers I used the Spellbinders Butterfly Card Creator. That's an older set, but I like that set and I still use it. And the Bumblebee is the Honeybee Lovely Layers Bug set. And that's a nice set too. That's an older set. And the sentiment is the Birch Press Hello Sugar Script. It's a shadow die. I didn't use the shadow, but I stacked it with the colors in the card and in the panel there. And I think that came out really nice actually. And I love these bugs. And I use that Lawn Fawn pearlescent vellum again, that pastel pearlescent vellum. And that bee looks really good. He looks like a really fuzzy bee. I don't know if you can see him too well, but anyway, I'm sorry I didn't mention that, but anyway. Okay, for the last card, I have stamped out the Life is Good flower stamp by Alex Siberia Designs. And I stamped it out twice. And I'm going to color it in with the stencils. I'm going to ink it up. And I've got some Simon Says Stamp inks here. And I'll do that. I couldn't decide if I wanted to stamp the images and cut them out with the die cut, or and then put them on another card base, or just stamp them onto this panel. And then I decided just to stamp them on and color them, but we'll see how it goes. Well, I finished inking this and I wasn't too happy about how it came out, because these red flowers, when they dried, there wasn't any distinction between the colors, even though I used two separate colors on these, and actually the centers are a third different color, but they all looked identical. So I had to go over the center flower to make it darker, and now you can't really read too much of the background. You can still see the background in it, but it's okay, I guess. I used the Waffle Flower A2 layers and the A2 additional layers to cut some, well, to cut the panel and to cut some Nina to provide dimension. So I'll go ahead and mount these on the card panel and then do the sentiment, and I'll be right back. When I glue the layers together, I make sure to fit it into the frame first to make sure that it's going in the right direction, because as hard as I try to be even all the way around when I place the frame down, there's always one edge or two edges that are going to be just slightly bigger than the others. And so when I glue them down, I want to make sure that I have it fit in the right location. And that way everything lines up as it should, and I don't have to do any trimming after the fact, because that's always, when you've got multiple layers, that's always a difficult task to have to manage. I stamped the sentiment and heat bossed it and die cut it and added another die cut layer to it, and then put some bling on it. And this card is done. Well, that's it for now. I hope you find inspiration in this technique for making card backgrounds with reactive inks and a gel plate. And if you've enjoyed this video, please hit the like button.